Good afternoon. Welcome you to my talk. First of all, I would like to thank everyone, Foundation Development Directorate, for giving me this opportunity to share my work with my colleagues and with my TAs and hopefully with students if they will come. So today I will be talking about the Imperial Circumcision Celebrations of 1720. As the title of my presentation presents. Well, actually, this is based on my book that I published in 2020 in Brill. And this research was based on my PhD research and my PhD thesis that I defended in 2017 at Boğaziçi University. In late July 1720, the Ottoman court announced in Istanbul that on the occasion of the circumcision of Sultan Ahmet's four sons, the court will hold a public circumcision celebration in Istanbul. And on this occasion, uncircumcised boys from the city and from among the nearby districts of Istanbul were also invited to come and register their names in the books of registers. And then this turned into a 3-week-long public festivity that held in Ok Meydanı and Golden Horn, as we will see. Actually, this topic is a very well-known topic in Ottoman historiography and art historiography. Maybe some of you are familiar with the images, not of Ibrahim, but of Lebni depicting the festivities. Because this subject, the festival paintings of the 1720 festival, was studied by Esinatıl. In 1969, Esinatıl wrote a dissertation about the festival paintings of this festival made by Lebni. And in 1999, this was published as a book. And these two studies became like the foundational texts in the field. Later on, all coming studies about Ottoman ceremonies or Ottoman festivals in general, they followed the same methodology set by Esinatıl. However, there are some obstacles related to this methodology that I was critical about when I first started my research. At this point, also let me briefly mention that at the beginning phases of my research, I received very harsh criticisms and very harsh comments by some very significant scholars in the field on the ground that this is a very well-known topic, that I will never be able to find any new sources, or I will never be able to propose a new methodology to the subject. And thankfully, I was able to accomplish both in the end. But it was very heartbreaking at this stage, and it shows us the iconic role of this study in the field, both in Ottoman art historiography and Ottoman historiography. One of the main obstacles related to the studies in the field before my study was that these paintings or paintings of this kind were regarded as if social realities, as if reflecting the social and cultural reality of the festival. However, they are visual representations of a text. They are not reflections of the festival itself. So this was the main obstacle. Another obstacle was that the field had focused on one illustrated copy that we will go over. Let me show you this. I think we have it. Yes. The field had focused on this copy made by Lebni, which was a copy made by Sultan. However, there was another illustrated copy which had never been analyzed in detail in comparison with this one, and no one had dared to make a research on this copy. And a third problem was that the text of this Surname festival book was not analyzed in conjunction with the images, so no one had ever asked whether are there differences between the images and the text, or are there any differences between the two copies. And fourthly, no one had ever dared to make an archival research on the subject, with just a very few exceptions. Süreyya Faruqi many years ago wrote 3 successive articles on the subject. She had found out the accounting book just of the subject. She was very interested in the subject, but then she told me that she couldn't find any other sources, and indeed she was so happy and supportive to me from the beginning of this project. These were the main problems that I was critical about. So I had 2 main questions, and later on these became like the 2 basic questions that I answered in my book. First, why Ottoman court held such a grand scale festival at this historical juncture, and secondly, how they managed to do this. And the second question especially had never been properly answered in the literature due to my study. So there are many other imperial celebrations and rituals that was held in different parts of Ottoman history, but no one had ever been able to answer this question. Well, actually, this festival was a series of other festivals that the Ottoman court held in the early 18th century, especially after the return of the court from Edirne to Istanbul. In 1703, we have a major rebellion, which is called Edirne Incident. The court at that time was residing at Edirne for approximately 50 years. So after this rebellion, one of the demands of the rebels was that the court would turn back to Istanbul. So first of all, the court was not resident in Istanbul for approximately 50 years. So whenever the court turned back to Istanbul, we see a conspicuous use of urban ceremonial to reinscribe the dynasty into the cityscape again, basically to remind the city dwellers the grandeur and the wealth of the dynasty and the social hierarchies once again. So in 1708, 1709, 1710, we see three successive wedding festivals that were publicly held in Istanbul. And then we had this festival, and afterwards it continued. We had in 1724 and 1728 other marriage festivals. But still the question is, okay, these wedding festivals were short scale, small scale festivals, the duration was short, and the cost was not that much high. Still, I was not convinced why there was a need to commission such a large scale festival. So this festival was also different from these contemporary festivals with its morphology, with its duration and the length. And then in the end, we can talk about this, but I have seen that I argue that this was the project of the Grand Vizier of the time, Damat Ibrahim Pasha, because he had been appointed as the Grand Vizier just 1.5 years before. So he had this intention to create a new image of the dynasty based on visibility. And to this end, during his Grand Vizierate, we see a conspicuous attempt to put the Sultan and the dynasty on the stage as the ultimate host within the social hierarchy of the Ottoman system. However, this was an illusion because in the early 18th century, the monopoly of the Ottoman dynasty in patronage system was severely curbed. There were alternative households, and the patronage was not now based on the palace. However, this was, I argue, was an attempt to revitalize the image of the ultimate benefactor. So this is my main argument. But this festival was also different from the previous ones with its venue, with the festival site. So traditionally, the festivals in the Ottoman Empire were held in hippodrome. So you see the hippodrome. So this is Damat Ibrahim Pasha Palace. You see the balcony, and here you see the illustrated manuscript from the 1582 Surname. Look at the balcony. This is the same balcony where Sultan was sitting. So this is the main venue where Ottomans were holding their public festivities, just like the Byzantine times. So this hippodrome was also a place for public festivities as well as rebellions during the Byzantine time. So Ottomans continued this tradition. And in the 16th century, we have numerous imperial festivals that were held in hippodrome, and in the 17th century, we have some processions that went along this road. So first of all, we have a departure from this tradition. For the first time in the history of Ottoman dynasty, we see that an imperial celebration extended outside the walled city. As you see, so this is the Ok Meydanı, this is Golden Horn, and I will show you. So they extend over there. So this shows that Ok Meydanı, proximity of Ok Meydanı and Tersane Palace. This is a late 17th century map. So Ok Meydanı at that time was an empty space. And most of the daytime festivities were held at the open ground of Ok Meydanı, and in the nighttime, the Sultan, his retinue and attendants were moving to the shores of the Golden Horn. So on a daily basis, they were moving in between two sides. But actually, this extension to the shores of the city and also to the outside the Balkh Peninsula were in parallel with changes in urban topography. We know that the city was extending to the shores as well as to the outside of the Walled Peninsula since the early 17th century. In the 18th century, for example, Kasımpaşa had been a huge residential palace place. So this must have referred to these changes in the urban scale. But also I argue that for this festival, the Ottomans needed a larger venue because, as we will see later on, only the number of attendants whose name I know was over 3,000. And we should add the attendance and the pages of the viziers and the spectators. Then in this space, there should have been like tens of thousands of people. And Hippodrome, as basically, cannot accommodate this amount of people, as you can see. So this must refer to then to the growing number of bureaucrats as well as the attendants and the pages in Ottoman court as well as to the urban dwellers. Well, for this study, primary sources are all critically important because I had, for the first time again in the field, I had at my hand a variety of sources with great numbers. And in this study, I collaboratively used archival sources, pictorial sources, and narratives from a critical approach to provide a holistic analysis of the festival, which I was able to do. Holistic means I am looking at each and every aspect of the festival and to their interrelationship, so no aspect is overlooked or is left away. So the first sources, obvious sources, are the surname. Surname is a genre. Surname means festival book. It's a genre that was developed by the Ottomans in the early 16th century. So whenever there was an imperial festival, certain authors were writing surnames, festival books. Today we have 11 surnames. And some other contemporary narratives. And some of these surnames, actually, in this case, 2 of these were also illustrated. So we have painted versions. So they were commissioned by the court. So as I told you, Istanbul had already studied the copy that was painted by Levni. This copy, which has a textile binding, is the one made by Levni. But this copy, there is another copy, was totally overlooked. And when I first studied this research in 2009, I think, when I was an MA student, I was amazed to see and learn that there was another illustrated copy that no one worked on. So I tried to understand the content of this copy, but then I have seen that the copy was in a problematic situation that I was not able to complete this research for an MA paper because the copy was bound out of sequence. The pages were out of sequence. There were many missing pages. So to me, whenever I started my research, it has taken approximately 1 year and 1.5 years to rebind, so to, let's say, relocate all the original pages. So in the end, I created the exact sequence of the pages. So I was able to understand that 24 folios are missing from this copy, and originally there should be 77 double page and 1 single page paintings, but now we have 6 to 8 double page and 3 single page paintings. Just to show you the condition of the manuscript, so this is how it looks like today. So here, for example, you see an illustration page, and here you see the text. So if you don't read the text and you don't compare the text with the other copy, you could assume that, okay, this is the illustration of this page. However, this page does not follow this painting. Normally, you have the text, textual narrative, then you have the painting. So this is, for example, from the 4th day. But this is a painting from the 1st day. So in order to find the exact image or exact pages of the text, you have to compare it with the other copy and read all the text. And for example, this is how it should look like. So this is what I did for more than a year. But then I was able to understand the content of the manuscript. Also, I made a codicological analysis. For example, here you see that the binding is of leather, but this is textile. So we understand that. So this was a much probably beholded copy that in the 19th century it was bound out of sequence and then it was rebinded again, and during this process, so this date 19th century for example, it was binded again, but this one was not. So there are this kind of details. Also I looked at the pages which pages are pasted, things like this. Anyway, so these are the first sources that I had, but this one had never been studied before. So other than this, we have a non-illustrated festival book written by Hafız Mehmet Efendi. It was transliterated when I made this research and it was published. However, no one had ever comparatively used this non-illustrated surname with the other surname. However, I was curious to see how this one represented the festival and the other one, the divergences between, because this one was commissioned by the festival superintendent, as we will see, like the chief organizer of the festival. However, in the case of the other one, it was commissioned by the Grand Vizier. So I was thinking that from an ideological point of view, they should have been referring to differences. So this copy is very simple, the language is very simple, less detailed, it is very short, but it is useful in some respects. Then we have Chronicle of Rashid Mehmet Efendi, who was the official chronicler of the time. We have chronograms, other chronicles that were written for earlier festivals and memoirs of foreigners, but the most significant and interesting sources are presented by the archival documents that I discovered at Prime Minister Ottoman, then Prime Minister Ottoman Archives, you understand it anyway. So I have found 3,482 unindexed archival documents that were preserved in 19 dossiers. At that time, they were not digitized. When I was making my research, I was shocked. Anyway, if you are interested, I can also tell this story. And then I continued to make a research, even if I found this, because as I told you, Süreyya Hoca had found an accounting book, so I thought that there should have been other documents in other catalogs. So these are the catalogs where I found documents. So then you can understand the documents related to the festival were dispersed among different catalogs. So this is the main problem related to a subject like festivals. Also, it holds for art history. If you would like to find an archival document, you have to look at each and every catalog because it could be everywhere. So there is no single catalog that you can find something. So based on these sources, and based on their analysis, a comparative and critical analysis from a holistic approach, I studied and examined the festival in 3 phases, and these make up 3 chapters of my book. The preparation of the festival, which refers to a 52-day-long period of preparations. And the staging of the festival, it refers to a 3-week-long public festivities, and then representation of the festival, referring to the aftermath. How the commissioners of these surnames wanted to be remembered or wanted to project the image of the festival. And in this part, I'm making a critical analysis of the text and image and archival documents to see their different representational strategies. Well, starting with the preparations, well, in late July, I think it is exactly 20th or 22nd of July. So we see an official announcement was made by the Ottoman Palace that the festival will be held. And automatically, the palace appointed the chief superintendent. So this was the custom. This is a temporary design position. Whenever there was an imperial festival, a bureaucrat was given this temporary title of Suremini, the festival superintendent. This time it was the superintendent of imperial kitchens, Matbah Amiri Emini, and Halil Efendi. So they gave him the task, but I argue that he was a figure close to Damat İbrahim Pasha. So I argue that highly probably Damat İbrahim Pasha preferred him. Anyway, so this is him, as you can see. So this man was the chief responsible. And then narratives tell us that Right after his appointment, he appointed a deputy for helping him, and this was Mehmet Ağa. So the two men, as I can see from the archival documents, were too busy until the end of the festival because they were the chief responsibles, and they were extremely preoccupied with everything, with rules of etiquette, rules of protocol, provisioning of materials, wages, daily wages of the people, as we will see, as well as for keeping the documents related to the festival. Because whenever I analyze archival documents, I have seen them, a bunch of them were prepared by his chamber, Daire-i Sur Emin. So his clerks were writing down the wages, all the expenses that they made, also the rules of protocol, and simultaneously from the accounting bureau, 3 scribes were assigned specifically for keeping the expenses and the registers of the court, and Ibrahim Efendi and 2 scribes. So his name was already mentioned in the narratives, but also I could see his name in the documents. So simultaneously, 2 offices were keeping documents, and in the end, the Office of Accounting Bureau asked extra documents from the Office of Chief Supervisor. So this research also told me and tell us about the working of bureaucracy in the early 18th century, their communication, how different bureaus communicated and worked. So I was amazed in the end about their details in documentation. And as I have seen, one of the first things that they did was to survey registers of earlier festivals. So this was a custom. Whenever there was a festivity or a celebration, the custom was to survey earlier registers to understand rules of protocol. And in this case, the festival of 1675, that was held in Edirne. In 1675, in Edirne, again, a major scale circumcision festival as well as the imperial wedding was held. So in this case, I have seen that they made drafts, they made copies from the registers of the 1675 festival, and then like this document, so this is a document made by Halil Efendi, we see like his signature. So the red ink shows indications like he's asking Sultan. So this is about the number of dining spreads in the imperial banquet. So he's asking this kind of question. Sultanım, whether are we going to follow the same format? Sultanım, are we going to give 3 dishes to this bureaucrat? Things like this. In this case, we don't have the imperial response of the Sultan, but sometimes also we have it. So it shows us, first of all, in its morphology and protocol, the festival dwelled on tradition. And then, when I analyzed all the documents related to festival preparations, I have seen them. There were 4 critical tasks through which Halila and Halil Efendi and Mehmet Ağa were preoccupied with. The first one was provisioning of copper utensils, kitchenware and tableware items for imperial banquets. And the second one was supply of food products, as we will see. The third one is making of large-scale hills and candy gardens, as we will see. And then the fourth one was registration of the names of uncircumcised boys so that they can also come for circumcision. Well, utensil provisioning process kapkacak in Turkish, so it was very complicated. So this shows us a summary list of all institutions or like groups from which the court borrowed utensils. I have lists showing me the purchases from the market, showing me the borrowings from Imperial Armory, Cephehane, and then borrowings from Imperial Treasury, Hazine, as well as borrowings from individuals like this. As you can see, so this is a reflection of this, the same. In the end of one of the books of documents, there was a, we call it icmal summary, showing the total numbers of the utensils that are asked from each group. So you see officials of the state, like bureaucrats, and then 11 religious foundations of the city. So each group are supposed to borrow different kinds of utensils. And then it was interesting, inhabitants of Kağıthane, Ok Meydanı, and Vezneciler, they were also supposed to give their utensils. Armenian and Greek churches, Jews were exempt because of their rules related to eating. Maybe you know it. In the Jewish rule of eating, for example, if you mix a milky product with the meat, then it is untouchable, something like this. So Ottomans respected it, they were exempt, but the Armenian and Greek churches could not. And guildsmen of the city, you see generally they gave gilded dishes. So this is the number asked. Why I'm taking your attention to this, and also if you would ask me how this borrowing process worked out, they appointed a certain scribe, katip, for this process. His name was Abdurrahman Ağa. Abdurrahman Ağa was responsible for issuing receipts. Yani böyle mahpus. So it shows us this receipt and it's front and the back. For example, it shows us the receipt of Mahmut Fethüdai Kuyumcu. He was a steward of the Guild of Goldsmiths. So it shows us the number, type, and weight of utensils that he gave. And after the end of the festival, he was bringing this document, and it's indicating, for example, 20, dishes at this weight. So exactly, he would receive 20 dishes with this weight. So this is how the process was handled. So it shows us this. And also from the Imperial Armory of the utensils were taken. I would like to take your attention to the wooden spoons. So 30,000 wooden spoons were taken, but this is the number returned. So they were, let's say, stolen. I have a problem because it's very easy to put the stone, put the wooden spoons inside. So you see the discrepancies between the numbers. Some of them were not going back. And if there are such kind of discrepancies for the number of utensils that were borrowed from the guildsmen and from the officials of the state, in the treasury, a certain amount of money was just reserved for such kind of losses and deductions, so that they were given instead money. If, let's say, your piece cannot be returned, then money was given in return. So this process is very complicated, especially on the part of the guildsmen. We have extensively also for the guildsmen. So what I was doing in this research was comparing documents, since I had a variety of documents. As you all know, generally there are discrepancies between the same type of documents. For example, in the accounting book of the festival, I have seen that only the numbers asked from the palace was mentioned. However, I have some other books of registers like this one. This one both mentions the amount asked and the amount delivered, which shows us that, for example, look at this, the Guild of Gunstock Makers. So this is the number asked from them by the court, but this is the number they delivered. So it means that sometimes some guilds and some people did not contribute in the amount that they were asked. And I argue that it maybe shows kind of a indirect social tension, because keeping in mind that these people would not be able to take back their utensils for more than a year. And also when we think of the very limited material resources of the guildsmen, so they needed these kind of dishes. Some of them maybe didn't want to give. And I also found another document related to the Armenian churches. They also contributed to the half. Half of the number of utensils that were asked. So why I'm mentioning this, because generally the literature just focused on the grandeur of the events and how great was that. But then these kind of small details, I think, show us that, well, the urban dwellers, some people were not probably that much happy because of the imperial celebrations, because they were under certain obligations. So I have a very long list, but anyway, this is just a part of it. And the second process was provisioning foodstuffs. There were banquets, as we will see, in Ok Meydanı. Each day a different group was invited, and in the 14th day of celebrations, urban dwellers were also given a public feast. And for this, huge amounts of basic products as well as other kinds of fruits and vegetables and everything. As you see, I have a very long list for this were provisioned. And since I had too many documents, both in my book and in my thesis, I'm making up tables so that the reader can see their number, type, and also the cost. So also it gives us the information related to the economic history, because we have also the prices. Anyway, look at the basic products. Just I would like to tell you that when we compare these amounts with the yearly consumption amounts of the Ottoman palace, they are even more. So then just in 3 weeks of a festival, they consumed more than a yearly consumption of the palace. So this just shows us the wideness of the festival and its scale. And also, another thing that the court was supposed to do related to food provisioning is that the attendants who were on duty in the festival side, they were given a daily allowance, which is called tayinat. And as you can see, different groups were given different amounts of tayinat. It's based on the hierarchies. So always in the festival, we see a hierarchical differentiation of different social groups. But anyway, so it also shows us this. So it shows us the milky products, spices, fruits, vegetables, fish just for the ambassadors, by the way, and the processed food. And let me tell you that lower ranking bureaucrats and the common people consume nearly none of them. So there is a clear differentiation. For example, we will look at the menu in a short while. Kabak kaylesi is a dish that is mentioned in the banquet of nearly all groups. However, the ingredients of kabak kaylesi was different for each group. So seasonings and spices, they were all exclusive to the higher groups anyway. And then the third task was making of large-scale nahuls and candy gardens. So these are nahuls. There were 2 different types, and these are candy gardens. So nahul is a kind of a 3-dimensional pole that is decorated with wax and fruits and flowers. So we assume that it comes from probably Dionysos festivals, referring to fertility, because you see the shape is like a phallus. And these were displayed only during the times of marriages and circumcisions, which also rely on the concept of reproduction and to the male virility. Well, we don't know where it came from. Probably it was a pagan form that later on passed to the Byzantines, and Ottomans also made use of. But we know that by the 16th century Ottomans, not just the elites, the common people were also using nahuls when there was a wedding ceremony or circumcision. In the streets of Istanbul, if you are wealthy enough, you are affording a nahul for your daughter or for your son. So in this case, so when the nahul belongs to the princess, these nahuls were 21 meters at length, and these are candy gardens, you see, like 3-dimensional maquettes of gardens full of fruits and flowers made by candies. So I was able to clearly understand the construction process of these candy gardens as well as the nahuls. I have an extensive list showing us the types of materials used and which group used which material. Basically, we see that all these different groups, I think more than 20. So these different groups of craftsmen worked in the project. So they were asked to come together on the occasion of the festival. So they were obliged to work for the project. And it shows us the total wage and the amount given to the objects and to the decorative items. So these craftsmen came together, and in total we see that there are more than 2,050 men. So for 52 days they worked very hard, because I see some petitions written by Halila saying the urgency of the completing nahuls and candy gardens before the inauguration of the event. And in one of them, Halila says that work day and night without any sleep so that you will finish the project. So they were really huge enterprises, and I published how they were designed and made in a separate article anyway. So this shows us the road of the procession. So in the end of the festival, these nahals and candy gardens passed along these roads. So they were publicly displayed in the city. So they are like the symbols of the wealth and symbols of the abundance of the dynasty in this case. So this is today's Istanbul University, Old Palace. So they departed from Old Palace. They passed through Veznecilerden Saraçhane. They moved to Aksaray. Then from the Laleli Mosque, they made a round tour. And then from Aksaray, they followed Divan Yolu. And finally, they came to Topkapı Palace. So you see, the road is quite straight. Normally, what was happening is that, so they were departing from Old Palace, and then automatically they were coming to the Hippodrome. But I argue that highly probably, intentionally, they extended the road so that all the city dwellers would see them. But I cannot imagine how complicated could be carrying these very huge navels in the very narrow streets of Istanbul. And then the fourth phase refers to the circumcision of the uncircumcised boys, as we will see in some minutes. We also have extensive registers identifying even the names of each single boy who were circumcised during the festival, as we will see. So, after this preparation phase, 52-day long, the festivities began at Ok Meydanı. By the way, I should mention you that 52-day was very short for organizing such kind of a festival. In the former festival, it took over more than 6 months. And in the 1582 one, it took over more than a year. So there seems to be like an urgent case. We don't know actually why in this year they wanted to make this festival, but it is very short in the standards of the Ottoman court. So it shows us the configuration of Ok Meydanı a week before the inauguration. Festivities, public festivities began on 18th of September. A week before, the site was adorned with the tents. So almost they made a kind of a military encampment at the Ok Meydanı, as you can see. So this is the tent of the Sultan, and the tent of the Sultan and his attendants is kind of surrounded by very light barriers, as you can see. And then facing it, we have the tent of the Grand Vizier and the other viziers. And here we have the courts of the armorers and other service-related tents. So almost they created like a military camp at Ok Meydanı. Well, I think this pattern also dwelled on the former festival that was held in Edirne, because this drawing is contemporary to this festival, made by John Cowell, who was a British priest who had seen 1675 festivities at Edirne. And based on this is a reconstruction. I didn't make it, but anyway. So based on this, they had also held this festival in the open ground, which is called Sırık Meydanı, just like Ok Meydanı. However, the difference of Ok Meydanı is that in this case, the encampment, let's say, was just adjacent to the walls of the palace. And just there were a number of tents that they pitched. In this case, however, it was very far from the palace, which means that, for example, the palace kitchen had to be transformed totally to Ok Meydanı. The distance is so vast. And also, we have here tents of all bureaucrats and courtiers, so then they just went beyond this idea. And it shows us the names and numbers of attendants who were on duty on the festival side. So even just if you calculate this, even this is more than 4,000. Just the attendance in the festival side. So we have a huge mass of people over there. And we know that Ok Meydanı was filled by urban spectators, both men and women. Generally, people are curious about women. What happens is that you can see women over there. In the third day of the festival, an official edict was issued that and allowing women to come and participate. But then we understand from the narratives that actually women were coming. So then this edict is like a justification. Since they were coming, the ulema was so furious. So then the Sultan had to respond this because they were coming. So they were watching the events together. So this is called in festival studies like a temporal break. So during the time of festivities, both in Europe and in the Near East or in the Ottoman case, whenever there were public festivities, social norms were relaxed for a temporal break time. And later on, whenever the festival will end, it will go back to the normal. However, during this period, just like whenever there is a wedding, we get fancy hairs and fancy dresses, this is just like this. So this refers to that, not because the women were coming together in public space with men. No, just during the duration of the festival. And the most obvious beneficiaries were the boys. Look at them. Do you see them? So they are the uncircumcised boys from among city dwellers. You can understand that. So I told you, whenever the announcement was made, uncircumcised boys were invited. So I have seen in the documents that it went into two phases. The one was that personally, you or your father, if you don't have a father, your mother anyway, personally coming to the first courtyard of the Ottoman palace and registering your name. And secondly, petitioning to the court. I have more than 2,000 petitions, just asking like, my boy is poor, can you just register the name? And I have, very interestingly, 3 extensive books of registers showing with the names, locations, and father's name of all these boys. Actually, one of them, this one I think, was the first thing that I discovered related to this bunch of documents. So one day I was looking to the documents in this dossier, then all of a sudden, so this is the beginning, and there is also the date over there. I was shocked and amazed to see that the names of all circumcised boys were just looking at me. And then I also have other documents which organizes the boys according to their day of circumcision. Look at this. So exactly it shows how many boys were circumcised on which day and which boy was circumcised on which day. And the other one organizes the boys according to their districts. It starts with Üsküdar, and then it talks about Üsküdar, Tophane, and then Galata, Istanbul, and Eyüp. So it organizes the boys according to the districts of the city. So that's how we can see the identities of these boys. And these boys, look at them, they are wearing kind of a uniform. This actually refers to an actual situation. Also in the narratives, it says that the Sultan, as he was the benefactor, was also giving a clothing package to the boys. And actually, they had a clothing package, but you can see their clothing package was very cheap in compared to the clothing packages of the sons of elites. So there is again a social hierarchy based on the clothing of the circumcised boys, because together with the poor boys, palace pages, the pages of the viziers and the sons of viziers, and some pages who were studying at that time at Enderun Palace School, they were also circumcised. And compare this. For example, for 5 pages from the inner palace, the worth of their clothing was 50 kuruş. However, the boys get just 2 kuruş simple clothing. Also, they just had a simple belt. They didn't have pants. They just had a kind of an outer skirt. So we have a social differentiation, as you can see, based on this as well. And then in the postdoc, I made a kind of a, like I worked in a digital project. So it was a GIS mapping project. So I placed the districts of each single boy in a digitalized map of Istanbul. So anyway, so hopefully one day I will publish something related to this because it requires more work. But this is how it looks like. This is a map that I have made. As you can see, so there are boys also living in the shores of the Bosphorus, and also huge number of boys are living in Üsküdar, in Kasımpaşa, but still a major number of them are living in, as you can see, in the historical, in the Bold Peninsula. And so whenever the festival started, okay, we have the circumcision of the boys, and then also starting with the first day, we have the food-related rituals, the imperial banquet. So each day a different group were invited. I mean, when I say group, I mean only the bureaucrats, the higher ranking and the middle ranking bureaucrats were invited for imperial banquets. So originally I can show you. So this is, so there you see, so the 3-columned tent. Do you see the 3-column tent? So this is the tent of the banquet. And also there's another one, two-columned one afterwards. The three-columned one are for highest ranking bureaucrats, and the two-columned one are for lower ranking ones. So they came and they had their food, and then I was very interested in the menu of the festival, and then I also discovered the menu of the festival. So I exactly know which group ate what, but again, you see, a social differentiation based on the group. The first group refers to the Sultan and the Grand Vizier and the Beylerbeyi, provincial governors. As you can see, they ate 19 different types of dishes, then it is diminishing to 16, to 9, to 5, and to 3 for the commoners and to the Janissaries and to the course of Cebehane. So we again have a social differentiation based on food, not only the number of dishes that they could taste, but also their ingredients change, and we have extensive list of documents showing us. By the way, this is a document showing us the menu. They also differentiated the groups. It's not just me. So I was very interested and amazed to see this. Also, look at the last group. They could just eat zerde as a dessert, but the other groups had different types of desserts. So this is again about recreating social hierarchies. And in the public festivities, the third rituals related to gifting. So custom, according to the custom, both the bureaucrats were supposed to give gifts to the Sultan, but also the guildsmen of the city. And in return, Sultan was giving them rewards or giving them gifts. So this mutual gifting was not haphazard. There were rules related to protocol, and when we come to the 18th century, it was definite. For example, for a pasha, what kind of a gift and at what worth he should give to a sultan. Or this is also the case for the guildsmen. So it's not like whatever you give, that you were supposed to give an exact type of a gift. And indeed, all these gifts were coming to the palace days before the festival. So the palace was having the gifts beforehand, and then when the festival started, they were publicly displaying them. And in illustrations, we don't see the gifts of the bureaucrats, with the exception of the Grand Vizier, because he is the most distinguished one. So it shows us the gifts of the Damat Ibrahim Pasha. They are presented to the Sultan. We have Quran, we have porcelain, we have a jewel belt and a cloth, and bundles of textiles, horses, as you can see, riffles, and then I think so. This is also a fur cloth. So it was very expensive. And the narratives related to this festival, they compare the gifts of Damat Ibrahim Pasha with the gifts of former Grand Viziers who gave gifts during previous imperial circumcisions. And Seyit Vehbi Efendi wrote that well, even if Sinan Pasha, who was the Grand Vizier during the 16th century, his gifts were so famous, even his gifts were very expensive, the gifts were of Damat Ibrahim Pasha were even more. So he's trying to justify that his gifts were even more extended. And then guildsmen were also supposed to present gifts to the Sultan. And I have seen from the archival documents that it's a very complicated situation, because before the start of the festival, I have found a petition of the guilds. The guilds came together and then they realized that they didn't have lists showing what exactly they should give during the time of an imperial celebration. They made a petition to the court. They asked to the court that right now they don't have at their hand information about their customary gifts, and they wanted copies from earlier registers. And then a response came from the court. They say that we are sending copies to the stewards, Kithuda, of your guilds. So we understand that everything is functioning based on documentation and writing. So rather than generally what we think of the early modern period. And then I have a book of registers which shows us exactly what kind of a gift each guild should give to the Sultan. And there are marginary roles written by the hand of certain stewards. So they ask, for example, that this guild was added on a later date. So this guild was added later also. Anyway, so it shows us that so the guildsmen were curious to know about their gifts, and they definitely knew that there was a custom, that it's not haphazard. And if you would ask me the type of gifts, Well, it was determined according to the finances of each guild. For example, goldsmiths, they were like rich, so their gifts were more luxurious and expensive. But for example, let's say barbers, so they were not financially that much well-to-do. In their case, a simple candlestick as a gift was okay. So it was arranged accordingly. However, I have also found some documents showing us the tension between the guildsmen, because some guildsmen didn't want to give gifts, or they didn't want to give the money through which the gift would be prepared. For example, I have seen that a situation between the sherbet makers and the bakkallar, the grocery shop owners. So sherbet makers said that, well, 4 years ago for the military campaign, we prepared 4 tents. So in this case, we want our exemption. So our rate should be covered by the grocers, because they were hierarchically under the guild of grocers. And the grocers said no. So the two went to Kadı court. So in the Kadı court, they said that, okay, this is true. So their amount would be covered by you. So I have found a number of cases like this. They are few, but it shows me that between the members of the guildsmen, this was an issue. So it was a huge financial burden for them. And some of them wanted their exemption, some of them just didn't want to cover the amount. So again, my point is that everybody was not happy about the festivity, but this is something we never see in tournament, in festival book. They are just focusing on the grandeur of the event, the magnificence. So these kind of things, we never had information beforehand. And then we have public performances, as I call it. So here you see illusionist. I call it Bulgari Alparayı in Turkish. It is exactly the same. So this is the performance of an illusionist, as you can see. And here we have the addicts. They are performing with wild animals, as you can see. So if you are interested, I can tell you about their games. And here we have animal trainers. They are performing, and musicians, dancers, and theatrical display. So this is called tapbal. It is again kind of an illusion show. So they were putting dishes inside their very large cloth, and they were bringing them outside. So this is like a kind of an old game. Anyways, and then there is a tightrope walker. So I was able to find for the first time in the literature about the names and the wages of each group and where they come from. It shows us how they were grouped by the Ottoman bureaucrats. So what happened is that whenever the festival was announced, also performers living in different parts of Ottoman Empire, they started to come to Istanbul. And then whenever they come to Istanbul, they petition to the court asking whether they can take the stage during the festival. So they are not, the people who made performances during the festival were not court artists. So there's a specific group of court singers and musicians. They performed in just one day, but they were an exclusive group. The majority of the shows were made by these performers who came from different parts of the world. But again, I would like to take your attention to the hierarchical differentiation between the total payment they received. Again, we understand that there was a hierarchy between these groups because their payment is quite different. And then also we have the names of many of these performers, where they come from. Just to mention, many of them came from the western provinces of the empire, and just 12 of them came from Cairo. And so these festivities held for 3 weeks. So 2 weeks were in Ok Meydan and Golden Horn, and in the last week they moved to Topkapı Palace. And in the first courtyard of the Topkapı Palace, they continued their celebrations. And then festival ended. First of all, whenever the festival ended, an intensive process of collecting the documents started for the bureaucracy. This I can clearly see from among the documents. And secondly, representing the festival started. The festival book at the beginning mentions that actually this project of festival book, Surname, had begun before the festival. At the beginning chapter, Said Vehbi says that before the start of the festival, a competition was made among the poets. And then Damat İbrahim Pasha was the jury. And in the end, he selected Vehbi Efendi and Raşit Mehmet Efendi as the authors who would write the surname of this festival. And and then also within the book, he also says that I am making draft notes. I am like copying my notes to a